1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey, it's Shay Keister, and I'm your host for the Casual Cattle Conversations podcast, where we foster innovation and enthusiasm in the ranching industry through sharing the stories and practices of different ranchers and beef industry leaders. Be sure to be a greater part of this podcast and become involved on my social media pages. Follow Cattle Convos on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, or Shay Keister on LinkedIn, to join the conversations around the challenges we face as ranchers and how we can overcome them. You can also find more information about this podcast, all my episodes, and how to partner with me on this show by going to my website, casualcattleconversations.com. With that, thanks for tuning in, and let's see who our guest is today. Alrighty, so thanks for joining me, Shelby. And just to start off, do you want to talk about what your background is in the beef industry?
Sure. And Shay, thanks for having me today. I'm really excited to get to talk to you today. So my background, I actually grew up on a cow-calf ranch in West Texas, a little town called Gale. Grew up on the cow-calf ranch and grew up showing steers as well. So really have been in it my whole life, and I'm just really passionate about helping the beef industry improve. And then I went to undergrad at West Texas A&M in Canyon, and then had an internship at a feedlot and decided, man, I really want to know more about this. So I decided to go to grad school at Oklahoma State. So I went and got a degree in ruminant nutrition, and then decided, hey, let's keep going, and came back to West Texas A&M to get a PhD in agriculture, but with an emphasis in ruminant health and immunology. So I kind of have a unique background I have nutrition and some immune experience as well.
Well, that's a pretty neat combination, and always love to see a cow-calf background on the show.
Yeah,
so
excited.
What do you do today then with all of that experience and education that you possess?
So today I actually work for Alltech. I am the beef technical service manager. So I kind of get to marry the best of both worlds. I get to look at research and see all the newest things coming out, but I also get to take that and interpret it and apply it to cow-calf guys. So I think it's a really unique channel where I get to use both my scientific background, but also the ability that I have to talk to cow-calf guys as well. And it's my favorite part of the job.
Well, I think it's always great to build that connection. That's kind of my favorite part of this too.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at Alltech and your role in your education, what I really wanted to kind of talk about today was gut health in calves. So could you talk about what a healthy gut is for a calf?
I think a healthy gut in a calf, man, when you think about it, it's really one of the most essential things that we need to establish that calf for a healthy future, right? So the immune system, about 70% of the calf's immune system resides in the gut, which a lot of people wouldn't think about that. Because when we think of the gut, we typically just think about it as being a digestive organ, right? Like we don't think of it as having two goals. We don't think of it as having an ability to help that animal stay healthy. So I think it really is essential, not only for good animal health, but it's also good for nutrition. If you want those animals performing and reaching their genetic potentials, they have to be able to have a healthy gut and absorb those nutrients that you're giving them. So I think to me, it's just essential for a healthy calf.
So then does that healthy gut come from, the feeds that are there, or where does that healthy gut come from? I mean, part of it's natural, but
right. So
what helps develop a healthy gut?
So a lot of it is having the gut microbial populations, which is a growing topic within the industry, right? And also in human health as well, is talking about those gut microbial populations, making sure that we are controlling those pathogenic bacteria, right? Because that's when a gut gets unhealthy, is when we have an overpopulation of E. coli or salmonella or something that is attaching to the wall and causing damage. So one aspect of a healthy gut is making sure we have the right microbial populations that are diverse, that are healthy, and we have minimal pathogenic bacteria. But also part of it is are we feeding that animal correctly? We want to make sure that we're not feeding things that are causing damage to the gut wall. So it's a combination of effects, really.
How does a healthy gut impact a calf's overall performance as it continues through its life cycle?
Oh, thanks, Shay. I think it's a really important thing to consider how a healthy gut is going to impact a calf's overall performance, right? Because we know that the number one cause of calf sickness and maybe morbidity is scours, right? So that's a gut health issue. So when those animals start off and they get sick, that makes them harder for those animals to recover and have the same performance as those calves that stayed healthy. So I think it's really important that we look at how we establish a healthy gut so those animals can make it through the system and they can maintain that performance throughout the system. Because, I mean, as an industry, we're getting to our genetics where we have really spectacular cattle, right? We're getting better performances, better conversions. And we want to make sure we're giving those animals enough nutrients, but also are we making sure that they're healthy enough so that they can actually absorb and utilize those nutrients so they can reach that genetic potential? And I think a cornerstone to that is making sure that those animals have a healthy gut from when they're a calf all the way through to the system.
So when you look at how gut health impacts a beef animal over its total life, where does that start?
In my opinion, it starts at cow-calf, because I think the cow-calf guys are the gatekeepers to health and longevity of not only their cows, but also those calves, right? So it starts as soon as that calf hits the ground, or maybe even before that, when we're feeding the mama cow before, are we making sure she is having the right enough energy for immune responses, right? So that colostrum quality is really important to a newborn calf. Well, if we're not feeding the mama cow enough, or if she doesn't have enough energy for antibody production, then she's going to have lower quality colostrum, which is going to lead to maybe a less healthy calf. So I think it starts back at the cow-calf guy, and that's really encouraging because they have the ability to improve health for that animal on the long run, right? Because the number one cause of calf sickness is scours, right? And scours is essentially a gut health problem. Those animals aren't able to absorb nutrients, and it's just leaving the backside. So if we can improve gut health in those calves early, we're going to improve their performance throughout their lifetime, because it's really hard to get over a bad start, right? So if those calves are already handicapped at the starting line, right? So those calves that were healthy are going and they're performing, but those calves that got sick have a handicap and have further to come. So they're likely not going to ever recover that lost performance they had as a calf.
All right, well, awesome. Thank you for that explanation. So we've talked about gut health and how it starts with that cow-calf segment, or even making sure that that bred cow is being fed right and is up to the nutritional requirements that she needs to support this calf. But as we move past cow-calf and we get into weaning, what are the main points producers need to understand about gut health as it relates to the backgrounding industry?
So I think this is another important part where producers can have a impact. So we know that stressors are part of our system, right? Because we're so segmented. We know that there are going to be periods of where that animal experiences stress. So I think some of the main impacts we can have in gut health is recognizing where those periods are and preparing those animals for those periods of stress, right? So gut health challenges occur when those animals are stressed, because stress decreases the immune response. So if they have gut health challenges, it's going to be harder to respond because they have a depressed immunity. And so it's really important that we make sure those animals are prepared for those stressors along the way. So one, making sure we slowly introduce those calves to grain if we're feeding them grain. That if they eat too much grain too fastly, we're going to cause massive problems within the gut, not only in the rumen, but you'll have some challenges in the gut as well. Slowly commingling, so we minimize the pathogenic challenge that those animals are having. And then maybe feeding something like a moss product that helps improve or promote gut health before those animals actually enter that period of stress. I think it's really about just, if we want to have a healthier cow herd that enter the feedlot healthier, we need to build a resilient herd that can handle those stressors, because we know where they are and we know the periods of when we can kind of have a tipping point and help them be healthier going into those challenges.
So would you explain a little bit more? I know I got this background in one of my nutrition classes and just a little bit growing up, but would you expand a little more on why you can't just drastically switch calves from, say, milk and grass or milk and hay straight to grain? Why is that important that that's a slow transition?
It's really important for a slow transition because that's when, so we're talking about the microbial population in the gut, right? Well, the rumen also has a bug population or micro bacteria that are in that rumen. And so what happens is when you switch those animals quickly from grass or milk to a starch or corn-based diet, then those bugs aren't prepared for that switch in feed stuff, right? So each bugs have specific feed stuffs that they use. So you'll have bugs that are specifically for fiber digestion and bugs that are specific to corn digestion. Well, sometimes what happens is when we switch those animals quickly is those starch bacteria, they overpopulate, and then we get acidosis, right? Which is not good for those calves. So it's really just allowing those microbial populations to slowly adjust to the feed stuff that they're being given.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that explanation. Now, as we look at mistakes producers make, so these listeners can maybe look at their management practices and see if they need to change anything. What would you say are some of these management mistakes that would be made during the pre-weaning phase as they relate to gut health?
Yeah, so I think that mistakes are hard to judge because you're going to have a difference between producers and the ability that they have, depending on their facilities or where they are, their weather. So I think it's really hard to say specific ones because each producer is going to be different. But I think one is we are moving cattle too quickly through the system, right? So we're weaning them and maybe sending them directly to a marketing. And so I think that could be really hard for calves. And I think we're not preparing those calves for the weaning period. So, right. So say we have calves that have been raised on if they've been raised in a pasture, they only know how to drink from a water tank and they only know how to either drink milk or eat grass from mama. I think one thing, and then one of the problems we have is when we remove those calves and then directly move them to a pen setting like that. The problem with that is those calves don't know how to, eat from a feed trough or eat anything other than hay. And then we're also asking them to learn how to use a feeder, right? On top of the stress of, hey, where's my mama go? I need to find her. So I think one thing that producers can do if they have the ability and facilities is to slowly introduce those calves with their mother to the places where they're going to be weaned, right? So say you have a lot that you're going to background them. Maybe open the gate if you have the ability for about 2 to 3 days before you wean those calves so they're familiar with the areas, and that's less of a shock for those calves when they get removed from mom and get moved to a weaning facility.
Well, awesome. Thank you for that insight. So what about mistakes made during the backgrounding period?
Yeah, so again, they would be pretty similar to pre-weaning ones, but one could be commingling calves too quickly or too many of them from different sources. That could be really hard. Maybe if you are grouping cattle from various sources, I would suggest maybe keeping those groups separate for a couple weeks, make sure they're healthy, and then bringing those groups together. I would say that introducing those animals to starch diets too quickly is also a major thing. And then I think that we should also be looking at maybe some gut health management. Like a lot of times we're not focusing on nutrition or how that gut is. And I think that's something where as an industry, we could maybe improve.
Okay. So we've talked about, what gut health is, where it starts, and some mistakes that could be made, but where can producers go for help in these areas or to fix some of these mistakes?
Yes. So I think part of it is just finding someone who, someone like, say you have an Alltech rep in your area, finding them, and we can look and evaluate your production system and see where we can implement some changes that would maybe benefit your animals. I think looking online resources, there are a lot of online resources where you can look at better ways to manage cattle or slowly move those animals through the system. And Alltech has a lot of resources on their website as well that can be useful. So Alltech, we're a feed ingredient company, but we also try and focus on how can we help the producers better themselves and find a better way to feed. And we also have some analytical services that producers can take advantage of as well.
Well, awesome. So is there anything else you'd really like to share today, whether that regards to your story, Alltech's story, or just gut health in general?
Yeah, I think that I would just like to emphasize that I think that if we're going to produce a healthy gut or a healthy calf, it really is looking at the beef system as a whole. So how are we feeding those animals so that they have a better health effect? And then how are we managing these animals so that we're bettering them for the finishing period, right? Because we all want to have a healthy beef system. So if we can start early and see how we're going to affect overall beef performance, I think that's a really essential thing to work as an industry and not as individual segments.
Well, thank you very much for hopping on today. I appreciate that.
Thank you for having me, Shay. I'm really glad I got to talk with you.